It's story time for Levi. Story time for Levi. Story time, story time, story time for Levi. Hi, Levi. It's Auntie Ashley. I have another story for you today. So, I've got another space book because there's so much to learn about space, and it never hurts to keep learning about it. So, we've got the Moon book today. And let's just get right into it, because I'm interested to see what we're going to learn today. It's always fun to learn new things with you. So this is The Moon Book by Gail Gibbons, new and updated. Alrighty. As the sun sets at the end of each day, the sky becomes darker and darker. On many clear nights, our moon shines brightly in the night sky. You've seen the moon before. A star burns gases that give off heat and light. The sun is a star. The moon reflects sunlight. It does not shine like a star. The moon revolves around Earth. Our moon is the brightest and biggest light in our night sky. It outshines all the stars and planets, which appear as small points of light. Some planets have many moons. Earth has one. Our moon looks big and bright because it is so close to Earth compared to the faraway stars and planets. It is about 238,900 miles away. It is so close to Earth, but it's almost 240,000 miles away. Now that's a concept that really shows you how big space is. Wowza. The moon is about 2,200 miles in diameter and about 6,800 miles around. Earth is about 8,000 miles in diameter and about 25,000 miles around. It's a pretty big difference between those two, huh? The moon is bright in the night sky because it reflects the sun's light. It is about 1/4 the size of Earth. It is made up of rock and dust. There is no air, no liquid water, or sign of life. Astronomers are scientists who study things in space, like planets, moons, and stars. An orbit is the path of one object around another. Astronomers have discovered that the moon is 4.51 billion years old, just slightly younger than Earth. Something probably collided with Earth and tossed out a cloud of rock and debris. While orbiting around Earth, the rock and debris came together to form the moon. In ancient times, people thought the moon was a powerful god or goddess. The Romans called their moon goddess Diana. In Greece, the moon goddess was Artemis, who rode through the sky in a silver chariot. Stories and legends were told about the shapes and shadows that showed on the moon's surface. Some people said the moon showed a man's face, the man in the moon, who was imprisoned there for stealing. Others told of moon demons living there. Now, I've heard of the moon being cheese. I don't know how likely that is, but it's a little bit more fun than someone being imprisoned in the moon. The moon is Earth's only natural satellite. It takes about 1 month for the moon to travel around Earth. A satellite is an object orbiting around a larger one. So the moon is the satellite traveling around Earth. The moon also spins only once as it orbits Earth. This causes the same side to always face our planet. 1 day on the moon lasts about 28 Earth days because the moon spins so slowly. The moon appears to change shape, but it doesn't. The different shapes we see are called phases of the moon. We are seeing different amounts of light being reflected on the moon. How much light we see depends on the positions of the Earth, Moon, and Sun. During a new moon, the moon is almost directly between the Sun and the Earth. The moon looks dark. We see no reflected light. So it's just a big black spot in the sky. In a few days, for the crescent moon, the moon is waxing when the lit surface we see is getting bigger. In a few days, a bit of sunlight side, I can't read. In a few days, a bit of the sunlit side of the moon shows. It forms a crescent. The first quarter moon. When the moon is a quarter of the way around Earth, it is in its first quarter phase. We see it as half lit. It is sometimes called a half moon. When the moon is waxing between a first quarter moon and a full moon, it is called a gibbous moon. So it just keeps getting bigger, but it's more than halfway full. With a full moon, about 2 weeks have passed since the new moon. Now the entire face of the moon we see shines. The moon is waning when the lit surface we see is getting smaller. When the moon is waning between a full moon and a last quarter moon, it is a gibbous moon once again. But then it's a waning gibbous because it's getting smaller. When the moon is 3/4 of its way around Earth, it is in its last quarter phase. Again, we see it as half lit. It is sometimes called a half moon. Once again, we see a small sliver of moon shining in the sky, and it's a crescent moon again. It takes the moon about 1 month to go through its entire set of phases. People used to know the time of the month by watching the moon's phases. Because then we're back to a new moon again, with no crescent at all shining. As the moon orbits Earth, it passes between the Sun and Earth as a new moon. Sometimes the moon lines up just right and casts a shadow on Earth. This is called a solar eclipse. We had one of those earlier this year and it was awesome. You will have to watch videos of that when you are older. It's very cool. The moon's shadow falls on Earth. A solar eclipse can last up to 7½ minutes. Warning, never look directly at a solar eclipse. The sun's rays can hurt your eyes. They make special glasses that you can wear, and then you can watch it. But safety first. Always safety first. Lunar eclipse. When the sun, earth, and moon are exactly lined up, a lunar eclipse happens. As in a solar eclipse, the moon's orbit is not tilted. Earth blocks off the sunlight that usually lights up the moon. The moon has a reddish glow. Lunar comes from luna, the Latin word for moon. All stages of the lunar eclipse can take about 6 hours. The moon affects the oceans too. The moon's pull, called gravity, on the oceans is strong enough to cause tides. Tides are the daily rising and falling of the ocean's waters. A high tide happens about every 13 hours, and a low tide happens about every 13 hours as well. This is because the moon takes about 25 hours to come back to the same place in the sky it was the night before. Tide differences vary around the world. Some night sky gazers and astronomers can get a close-up view of the moon by looking through binoculars. Others look through telescopes. Some huge telescopes are used at observatories. A close-up view of the moon's surface shows dark patches astronomers call maria. Other areas are covered with craters, mountains, and valleys. The oldest identified moon crater is about 2 billion years old. For centuries, people have wanted to know more about our moon. In 1959, the Soviet spacecraft Luna 3 transmitted to Earth the first pictures of the far side, or back, of the moon. There aren't as many dark areas on that side as on the side we see from Earth. In 1961, President John F. Kennedy made a commitment to put Americans on the moon before the end of the decade. At first, many American unmanned spacecraft were sent. Pictures were taken. Then Surveyor 1 landed on the moon in 1966. It sent back information about the moon's surface. The first manned orbit of the moon was made by Apollo 8 astronauts in 1968. On July 20th, 1969, Neil Armstrong and Edwin Buzz Aldrin of the Apollo 11 mission became the first men to walk on the moon. There were 5 more Apollo landings on the moon. The last one, Apollo 17, was in 1972. The astronauts did experiments and gathered samples. Astronomers and other scientists were able to learn more about the history and nature of our moon. On a clear night, when the moon is in the sky, gaze up at it. We are still learning more about our closest neighbor, the moon. The end. Here's some fun stuff. About 4,200 years ago, people in ancient Mesopotamia thought that a lunar eclipse was a bad omen. About 2,500 years ago, a Greek philosopher, Anaxagoras, was the first to theorize that the moon's light came from the sun, and he was imprisoned for it. And now we have come to learn that he was actually correct. About 2,200 years ago, a Greek astronomer, Aristarchus, figured a way to measure the distance from Earth to the moon. Wow. About 2,000 years ago, a Syrian philosopher, Posidonius, explained the effect the moon has on tides. In 1609, the Italian scientist Galileo used a telescope to study the moon. He was the first to write that the moon had mountains and valleys. In 1647, Hevelius, a pioneer of moon mapping, charted more than 250 formations on the moon. In the 1850s, the first telescope-based pictures of the moon may have been taken by William Bond and J. Whipple in the United States. 1920s, a French astronomer, Bernard Liot, concluded that the moon's surface was made of dust. 1959, the Soviet spacecraft Luna 2 was the first spacecraft to reach the moon. It crash-landed. Luna 3 took pictures of the far side of the moon. In 1966, the Soviets' Luna 9 was the first spacecraft to make a soft landing on the moon. It was also the first object to transmit a signal to Earth from another celestial object. In 1968, the first manned orbit of the moon was made by Apollo 8. And then on July 20th, 1969, Neil Armstrong, the first man to set foot on the moon, said, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." Egyptians said that the moon was the god Osiris, who died and came back to life each month. Interesting. The ancient Chinese believed the goddess Chang'e lived forever in the moon. The Chinese eat mooncakes in her honor each year at the Mid-Autumn Moon Festival. That's nice. The ancient Vikings believed the dark shapes on the moon were of a girl and boy who were kidnapped while getting a bucket of water. There are legends that say that the full moon can change people into werewolves. Ow! The Cherokee Nation held the Great New Moon Festival around October to mark the beginning of the Cherokee New Year. Here we go. Some people used to think the moon was made of cheese because of the shapes and shadows on the moon's surface. Hey Diddle Diddle, the nursery rhyme, has a famous line. The cow jumped over the moon. Hey Diddle Diddle, the cat and the fiddle, the cow jumped over the moon. In Britain, France, and Ireland, ancient stone circles have been found that line the viewer up with the rising and setting positions of the moon. The temperature of the moon varies greatly. Scientists estimate that it may rise as high as 200 degrees Fahrenheit and fall as low as negative 250 degrees Fahrenheit. Yikes, that sounds terrible. Gravity on the moon's surface is about 1/6 of Earth's gravity. That means if you can leap 5 feet on Earth, you could leap 30 feet if you were on the moon. The largest crater visible to us on Earth is the Bailey crater. It is 183 miles across. Wow. 842 pounds of moon rocks were brought back by Apollo astronauts. The moon travels in its orbit at about 2,300 miles per hour. When there are 2 full moons within the same month, the second full moon is called a blue moon. This happens about every 2 to 2.5 years. So if you say that something happens only once in a blue moon, that means it does not happen very often. The harvest moon is the moon closest to the first day of fall, on September 22nd or 23rd. On many clear days, we can see the moon in our daylight sky. And that is the Moon Book. I hope that you learned something fun today. I know I did. Always enjoy reading these types of books with you. You'll have to let me know if you think that space is going to be your next interest, or if we need to get some more animal books, because I'm always happy to read you more about doggies. Love you, Levi. Hope you have a good day. See you next time. Bye.